and welcome to another episode of the Literary Lutheran Reads the Book of Concord. Today we will be finishing Article 24 on the Mass, picking up where we left off in the Mass for the Dead. The Greek canon does not apply the offering as a satisfaction for the dead because it applies equally for all the blessed patriarchs, prophets, and apostles. Apparently, the Greeks make an offering as thanksgiving and do not apply it as satisfaction for punishments. Furthermore, they do not speak of offering solely the Lord's body and blood, but of the other parts of the Mass, namely prayers and thanksgiving. After the consecration, they pray that it may benefit those who partake of it. They do not speak of others. Then they add, "Yet we offer to you this reasonable service for those having departed in faith, forefathers, fathers, patriarchs, prophets, apostles." Reasonable service, Romans chapter 12, verse 1, however, does not mean the offering itself, but prayers and all things that are preferred there. Regarding the adversaries quoting the fathers about the offering for the dead, we know that the ancients speak of prayer for the dead, which we do not ban. We disapprove of applying the Lord's Supper for the dead by the outward act, ex opere operato. The ancients do not favor the adversaries regarding the outward act, opus operatum, even though they have the references, especially of Gregory or the moderns. We hold up to them the most clear in certain scriptures. There is a great diversity among the fathers. They were men and could err and be deceived. If they were alive now and would see their sayings assigned as falsehood for the scandalous lies that the adversaries teach about the outward act, opus operatum, they would interpret themselves differently. The adversaries also falsely quote against us a condemnation of Arius, who they say was condemned for denying that an offering is made for the living and the dead in the Mass. They often use this clever term, quote the ancient heresies, and falsely compare our cause with them to crush us by this comparison. Epiphanius declares that Arius maintained prayers for the dead are useless. He finds fault with this. We do not favor Arius either, but we do argue with you because you defend a heresy that clearly conflicts with the prophets, apostles, and holy fathers. This heresy is that the Mass justifies by the outward act, that when applied it merits the pardon of guilt and punishment even for the unjust if they do not present an obstacle. We object to these deadly errors which divert people from the glory of Christ's passion and entirely overthrow the doctrine about the righteousness of faith. In the law, the godless had a similar belief. That is, they believed they merited the forgiveness of sins not freely through faith, but through sacrifices by the outward act. Therefore, they increased these services and sacrifices, set up the worship of Baal in Israel, and even sacrificed in the groves in Judah. Therefore, the prophets condemned this belief and war against not only the worshippers of Baal, but also other priests who made sacrifices ordained by God with this godless belief, as seen in 1 Kings chapter 18, verses 1 through 40. This belief that such services and sacrifices atone remains and always will remain in the world. Carnal people cannot tolerate that the honor of an atoning sacrifice belongs solely to Christ's sacrifice because they do not understand the righteousness of faith. Rather, they assign equal honor to the rest of the services and sacrifices. The godless priests in Judah held a false belief about such sacrifices. Baal worship even continued in Israel. Nevertheless, a church of God was there that objected to these godless services, as seen in 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 18. Baal worship remains in the realm of the Pope, the abuse of the Mass. By it they think they can merit the pardon of guilt and punishment for the unrighteous. It seems that this Baal worship will persist as long as the reign of the Pope. It will continue until Christ comes to judge and by the glory of his return destroy the reign of the Antichrist. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 1 through 8. Meanwhile, all who truly believe the gospel should condemn these wicked services. Against God's command, they were created to cloud over Christ's glory and the righteousness of faith. We have briefly said these things about the Mass for the following reasons. First, we hope that all good people everywhere understand that we keep the dignity of the Mass and show its true use with the greatest zeal. Second, our reasons for disagreeing with the adversaries are most just. Further, we would encourage all good people not to help the adversaries in the profanation of the Mass, burdening themselves with other people's sin. This is an important cause, an important subject, no less important than the work of the prophet Elijah, who condemned the worship of Baal. We have presented this important discussion with the greatest restraint and now reply without using abusive words. But if the adversaries push us to collect all kinds of abuses of the Mass, we will not present the discussion with such toleration. This has been the Literary Lutheran Reads a Book of Concord, and I wish you a blessed day.